Men and women, what made you not want a second date with someone? I was at the mall one summer day, hanging out with some friends. I saw this guy who looked like a friend of mine, so I walked up to him only to find that he was not that friend. He was cute. We introduced ourselves, exchanged pleasantries, gave me his beeper number. I'm old, and we planned to go get coffee sometime. I was a hot, spooky chick, and he was a hot, spooky dude. The day arrived. It turns out he worked at a Red Lobster down the road from my house, so I walked over there to meet him after his shift ended. We went to see The Craft in the second-run theater. We held hands, kissed during the movie. We went to get coffee after, and we chatted. What year are you? Going to be a junior this fall. Cool. I didn't go to college. College? Oh God, how old are you? So that's the story about how two strangers vastly over or underestimated each other's ages. I thought he was 17 to 18. He thought I was around 20. I was 15, and he was 25. He took me right home, and we didn't go out again. That must have scared the crap out of him. Story 2. He'd been to lunch a few times, but this was the first real romantic date. We met in biology class in college. She was gorgeous and smart and had a smile that could melt diamonds. I was in a group project with her and took her to lunch, and she confessed she had a crush on me. So we kissed before going back to class and made plans for a date and went out that night. And we had a wonderful time. Until about the time she asked me what my dealbreaker for dating was. As in, what trait would someone have that would immediately make me break it off? I said something like I wouldn't date a racist, someone who had a sociopathic streak or was mean, stuff like that. She said that she could date all kinds of guys. Fat, skinny, black, white, it didn't matter. The one thing she could not abide, the one kind of guy that she absolutely, positively would never, ever be with, was a guy with a hairy back. I'm Iranian. The end. Razors exist. Story 3. Her boyfriend that I knew nothing about showed up. In high school, I went on a date with a girl I met through a friend. I'd been texting a while and seemed to really hit it off. She brought a girlfriend because we'd been talking, but I'm still a relatively unknown guy. I get it. Guy crashes the date, chatting casually with everyone, and offhandedly refers to the girl I'm there to see as his girlfriend. I was too awkward, shocked, and hurt to say anything and left soon after. We texted later, and when I asked about it, she said, he probably just said good friend. That quote has stuck with me. Maybe something else was going on, and it was someone she had tried to get rid of, and my autistic self missed some cues, but at the time, it felt like a really bad cover. She's probably just a dummy. Story 4. It was my first and only blind date, which a mutual friend of ours set up. She arrived and parked in a disabled space. Got out of the car, telling me she uses her NAN's a disabled pass, which didn't sit well with me, but carried on anyway. We went bowling and to dinner. She was really rude to the service staff in both places, which I found embarrassing and uncomfortable. Cut the dinner short, paid, left, and never saw her again. Story 5. She was on her phone 60% of the date. Met with her for drinks, following a greeting or a smile or hug. Her head went back down to her phone. Asked if she wanted to grab something from the bar and didn't lift her head when she told me what she wanted, nor did she come to the bar with me. Okay, whatever. I was definitely in a state of mind at the time that I just wanted to try things out, gain experience, roll with the punches. The other 40% of the time was basically her talking about herself. That I can bear with. Not great, but bearable. It happens. That's part of the idea, to get to know the other person. But most of that was about her crappy ex and how terrible the breakup was. Sadly, no back and forth or basic conversation. Definitely got out of there politely and soon. Never looked back. To be clear, no heartbreak on my end. Purely just a bad date. Happily with someone now. Well, I'm happily single. Am I happy? Story 6. She criticized absolutely everything. The car I was driving, clothes I was wearing, cologne I chose. We were supposed to go bowling, dinner, and then drinks. When an attendant came over to ask if we wanted anything, I ordered my snacks and asked if she wanted anything. You mean you don't know? What kind of date is this? Halfway through our game, she mentioned I was bringing up the wrong conversation topics. Thankfully, my brother called me out of the blue asking to borrow some fishing gear, and I played it as work calling me in. I couldn't get out of there fast enough. Story 7. I met a girl at work who decided to invite me over to her house to hang out. Everything was cool, until I went to the bathroom. The bathroom was an absolute wreck. Hadn't been cleaned in maybe years. There was scum and hair everywhere. I could have dealt with all that, but when I raised the lid to take a whiz, I saw poop floating in some water and with a piece of toilet paper over it. She had just been in there a bit before myself. I flushed, whizzed, and then called it a night. I would have gone out the window. Story 8. This happened last week. When we got to the good old, what do you do for a living, she straight up tried to sell me in on her MLM scheme. When I politely noted I wasn't interested, but I'm happy to go back to our previous discussions, she got argumentative in the good old salesperson losing a client kind of way. When it was clear the mood was ruined and we weren't going anywhere from there, I stood up, paid for our drinks at the counter, and got out. Bonus points for some of my friends, coincidentally sitting at the table behind us. Her. I could see them. And giving her weird looks as she was ranting about the life-changing opportunity that pretty much solidified my thoughts. Story 9. I had more in common with the chaperone she brought to the ice cream shop and didn't seem to have anything to say that wasn't as a godly person. Like, fine, you brought someone to make sure I wasn't a creeper. I understand that. But when you make it very clear that it's your youth pastor acting as the chaperone and invite him to sit at our table, then say nothing until the pastor feels bad enough to break the silence to talk to me, maybe you don't cry and ask why I don't want a second date? That was my first ever date in my life. We'd spent about 2 hours talking the day before the date and really hit it off. No indication of the church stuff until she walks in with the pastor. I think bringing him was her choice, but I'm not sure. Either way, she was fully into the church stuff and asked me after our date if I wanted to come to church with her. And kept asking and asking and asking. I think she was trying to get me to join the church more than she wanted to date me because I saw her in a church group later in the year rather aggressively asking people to come and throwing pamphlets into people's arms. And a female friend of mine had a similar experience with a guy from the group. And the same youth pastor. Story 10. My time to shine. Went on a date with a guy who I've dubbed PowerPoint Guy. He arrived at our first date, coffee, with a literal presentation of non-negotiable demands he required from a future partner, including, but not limited to, must be housewife, produce him 2 boys and a girl, in that order, gender specified, not work or desire a career, move 500 miles away to live in an acreage in his parents' house, like with them also living there. Not having any male friends, but he also wanted someone who was open to sleeping with whoever he chose so he could watch. The list goes on. He didn't ask me a single question about my life or interests, just spat out this list of stuff and talked about himself for about 2 hours, at which point I politely bailed. Props to this guy for knowing what he wants, but PowerPoint Guy did not land a second date with me. I'm surprised she stayed for 2 hours. Story 11. Arrived 40 minutes late with no text to say he would be. Turned up with his laptop and said he needs to do some work and gave me some cash to get him coffee and something I want. I was like, okay, sure, and stood in the queue watching him as he put on his headphones and opened his laptop. I came back with the drinks and he said he just needs to finish this and took a call. I just sat there for another 40 minutes with zero conversation and him typing or chatting away. This was a Saturday, by the way, and he scheduled the time. After he finished, he said let's go to a bar and get a proper drink. We had a chat and I tried to get to know him, but he was being a schmuck. He ordered the drinks and then started having a go at me for not offering to pay and went on a rant about double standards. To be honest, I was still mad about waiting around for 90 minutes and was not in the mood to pay for his drink or see him again. You should have bolted the moment he pulled out a laptop. Story 12. Matched with a guy on Tinder in 2014 while I was in grad school and new to the city I was living in. He seemed cool enough and lived in a small town about 45 minutes outside my city. He offered to take me out for dinner and I agreed and said I would meet him at dinner, in regard to my own safety. He insisted on picking me up and showed up with a liter of Fireball and sat down on my couch and started pouring shots of it for me and my roommate. He seemed like a genuinely nice guy, just oddly misguided in that I was not interested in binge drinking Fireball before dinner. He ended up drinking nearly all of it and tried to hook up with me. When I rejected him, he wanted to drive home despite being completely hammered. I forced him to sleep on my couch and locked the door to my room. Never spoke again, but he did try to add me on Snapchat about 4 years later. Story 13. The dude I had texted and bonded over the fact that we both liked drawing and decided a fun way to get to know each other on our first day would be to bring our sketchbooks and share what kinds of things we draw. I brought along my little moleskin sketchbook. He brought an accordion file filled with one-page comics. He then proceeded to read every single comic out loud to me with character voices. There were dozens of comics. His enthusiasm was fine. It was the fact that he never even asked me to share my art with him and instead made sure I was his audience the entire evening, instead of an active participant in the conversation. Later, in the day, while we were taking a walk, he pointed out a park bench and told me a story of him and his ex-girlfriend aggressively making out in it in the middle of the day, while surrounded by picnicking families. No thanks. Some people just don't have social skills at all. Story 14. I went to this guy's house and we made pizza, drank wine, and watched a movie. I was nice and intoxicated or full by the time we started watching the movie. He picked the movie. I forgot the name, but it was the older movie with Angelina Jolie's dad, and that guy found that old town and got essayed. The guy who I'm chilling with goes, "Wow, what would you do in that situation?" I'm like, dude, I don't know. That's a weird question. Then after that scene, he leans in for a kiss, then just stops and sits back up like nothing happened. It was time for me to go home. He drove and he ran over some traffic cones on the way back. I thought we were for sure going to get in an accident. That made me not want a second date. Story 15. When I first met him, he kept standing way too close to me and his breath smelled like cigarettes. Throughout our date, he would start looking around and be clearly listening to surrounding conversations every time it was my turn to speak. Like the moment he would stop babbling, he would be looking everywhere to listen to anything but me. At one point, he sneezed into his bare hand, looked at it and said, "Ugh," then wiped it on his pants. An hour or so into this, he interrupts me mid-sentence, a sentence that he was paying zero attention to, of course, and says, in what sounded like an attempt at a sexy voice, "Hey, want to get out of here?" I, seeing it was the late hour of 9 p.m., still said, "Oh, hey, well, it's getting late. I should get home." I was grateful when I didn't hear from him for a week, before he texted me asking to hang out again while I was at an event and couldn't really respond right away. He gave a snarky follow-up an hour later because I hadn't responded, which I thought was hilarious because of the hypocrisy. Anyhow, I told him I didn't think it would work out, and that was that. Story 16. First day was uneventful. We talked about what we did, our backgrounds, upbringing, etc. Vapid, nebulous stuff. This was late afternoon Saturday. We parted and I went to a pub to meet some friends. The following morning I slept late and opened my phone to a barrage, around 4, of messages from my date. She's listing all the things I should have done or said better, what she found annoying, etc. I'm looking through it pretty damned hurt. Start to write what I thought, wow, there's no need for that. Just say thanks and bye. But remember not to text when emotions run high. That afternoon, another message. When do you want to try again? Think it could be fun? This time I did respond. Never. Story 17. She talked about her ex-girlfriend of a few months for about half the date, then proceeded to explain to me how she essayed her ex when her ex didn't want to have intimacy with her yet. I kept asking to leave. My things were in her car, but she kept saying that she was having a good time and that she loved that I was such a good listener. I texted my sister to come get me, and when I informed my date of this, she got upset with me. It made me tell my sister to go back home because she wanted to drive me home instead. She even texted me the next morning and told me she had a great time and wanted to see me again. I've never blocked someone so quickly. Story 18. She kept talking about how life was supposed to be enjoyed to the maximum. Basically, how she spent lavishly on expensive Italian, French, or Japanese dinners and trips, making her constantly broke and constantly borrowing money from other people to sustain her lifestyle. She considered it classy. I considered her delusional. Unsurprisingly, I ran for the hills as fast as my legs could carry me. No, thank you. Story 19. To start, he was nearly 30 minutes late to the restaurant. Blamed traffic for being so late. Even though we don't live in a city, he was a little intoxicated when he turned up, but I can understand if he was a little nervous beforehand. I ordered a meal and he ordered 3 beers for himself. After he downed a few, he then proceeded to tell me I was a 7 out of 10, and to get to a 10 I should get plastic surgery so I can be a model. I told him repeatedly that I was happy with the way I looked, but he kept going on and on about what I should get done. After I'd finished eating, I said I'm going to pay for my meal then head home. I wanted to go to the bar and convince me to go with him. I ordered a drink, then turned around to see him leaning over a couple of young ladies who looked pretty uncomfortable, so I put my drink down and left. I sent him a text the next day saying it isn't going to work and blocked him. 1 week later, I get a call from an unknown number, and it's his mom. She tells me about how he came to visit her and told her all about me, and how happy she is that her boy has finally found someone, and invites me to dinner, which I turned down. Story 20. Different guy. I told him I'm not much of a kisser even before the date, that I show intimacy in other ways. The day had been great. Then at the end, he was catching the train, and just before he jumped on, he leaned in to kiss me, which I dodged, and he went straight on the train. Because he left it in an awkward time, just as he was leaving, I didn't have a chance to hug him or do anything else. Rather than responding maturely, he sent me loads of insults over Snapchat, and 2 days later claimed his mate sent them, and he wanted to see me again? Story 21. Went out with this young lady who thought it was fun to bash me all night. I have a good sense of humor, but about the 5th time she called me stupid, I was done. She was boring and full of herself. I finally asked her what the heck her problem was, and she responded that she was just joking and I was sensitive. I finished the date. I could tell it was awkward for her, but luckily I don't have problems with confrontation. I told her she was just being sensitive and got over it. I took her home and didn't get out of the car, open her door, or walk her to her door. I think another issue with her was when she found out I cut grass as a second job. This was the late 80s. She mocked that and turned her nose up at it. When I responded I made over $25 an hour doing that, she looked at me shocked but still found it embarrassing. This is tame for most of the responses here. I dated around a lot when I was younger. I only went on 1 blind date. I never went out with someone I didn't get to know at least a little. I couldn't imagine how I would deal with some of the mental cases reported here. Story 22. I actually feel bad that I wasn't honest with why I didn't follow up with her, but a while ago I went on a date with a girl who was seemingly very sweet and very attractive. Probably out of my league. We had a good time, hanging out at a bar or restaurant, and we liked a lot of similar things, and she was studying to be a nurse and had an internship. Cool. But then she told me that part of her internship was helping with schizophrenic patients as well as other mentally handicapped individuals. And one thing she thought was hilarious, ways to mess with them. She told me she liked to mess with the schizophrenics by telling them things like, "Yeah, I really am out to get you," and things of that nature. When she said this, I just said that my grandmother was heavily schizophrenic and it's a very serious and harsh problem and it felt bad for them. It ended the conversation, but the day proceeded for a bit longer before ending and we parted ways. She definitely wanted to do it again, but I just couldn't after that. Not sure if she just kind of said something she thought was goofy at the moment and didn't actually do those things, but either way, it was a deal breaker for me, for sure. Also, I had no actual clue where she worked, so before anyone asks, I couldn't have really reported her or anything like that. Story 23. We've been talking on Tinder for like 6 months. Date went really well. He was super sweet and chatty. Right at the end, he said, "I thought your profile pictures were beautiful and you're even more beautiful in person." I was like, wow, that's a lovely thing to say. Until he finished it with, "And your melons are even bigger than I thought. Are they still perky or do they sag?" The waitress was standing next to us. We both just stared at him, then I asked for the bill, paid it in full, and left. Some men are dense, but some men are just very talented at ruining things. Story 24. I recently went on a date with someone who's a good guy but unloaded on me emotionally for longer than an hour. I tend to present as a good listener, and this happens to me sometimes. I appreciated what he was sharing, but he didn't ask me questions in return, and I didn't have space in the conversation for it to be an equal exchange. Though I tried. If it starts to feel like I'm your therapist and it's not a two-way conversation, that's a deal breaker. How many dates have you been on? Comment down below and don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos like this. Story 25. All he kept talking about the entire day was how, in the future, self-driving cars would be way better than people could ever drive, and this would be the ideal way. I questioned that idea, not really knowing enough about the subject to have an informed opinion, but just going off what he was saying, and he made me regret it for the next hour, and he insisted that no matter how good a driver I was, a computer would always be better. He wouldn't shut up about self-driving cars the entire time. To this day, I hate the whole idea of it, mostly because of him. His name wasn't Elon, was it? Story 26. Tinder date 3 to 4 years back, wouldn't stop showing or talking about her knife collection, which was easily 400 plus knives. He even whipped out her favorite butterfly knife in a restaurant full of kids to show me and started flicking it around her hand. After the entire date of her being extremely handsy with me, I decided to touch her back for the first time, after 3 hours, by putting my arm around her shoulder while we were sitting down with her hand resting on my thigh. Her immediate reaction was to scream at the top of her lungs, "What the heck are you doing?" This happened at a train station in Germany, which was very empty to my luck. I was confused, dazed, looking around because I knew what it looked like. She then just says, "Oh, sorry. That was a knee-jerk reaction. Sorry if I hurt you. Anyways, I was saying, my favorite game is probably Mass Effect 3 or Zelda." She carries on the conversation as if nothing happened. I'm in disbelief. I'm scared. I want out of here. Waiting for the train that was coming in 12 minutes felt like centuries. Train arrives, immediately jumps in, doesn't even say goodbye, no eye contact. As the door is closing, she says, "Hope I get to see you again soon." I had locked myself into the train's bathroom and fall to my knees. Holy crap, I thought I was going to get hurt. Not only did she not get a second date, I didn't date at all for the next 3 years. Man was traumatized. Story 27. A lady I knew used to hassle me about taking her out one night. I was friends with her sister at the time, and she said her sister was keen to go out with me. Even her mother wanted me to take her out, so we arranged to go for a drink. She turns up with another guy who just sits there and says nothing the whole time. After about 30 minutes of awkwardness, she says to her friend, "Right, shall we make a move?" And off they go. Fast forward 3 or 4 years and we're at her sister's wedding. Girl who took out started complaining at me for not taking her out again. I just smiled and walked away. Story 28. I went to see this band play at a record store with a girl from a business class. As the guy is counting change, she laughs and goes, "This guy definitely isn't in business school." Directly in front of him. I gave her a brief look of disgust and continued with the band. For the rest of the night, she scanned through records while I danced to the band in the other room. I think she knew at the moment as well that we were incompatible, mainly because she was so disrespectful and I didn't entertain it at all. Gave her a ride home after, but we definitely never went on a second date. Story 29. It wasn't the first date, but the second. She and I hung out once, and things were pretty cool. We decided to hang out a second time. While we hung out, she told me about being divorced twice and essentially said was looking for a new father for her son who was removed from her care. Keep in mind, we had talked off and on for 3 months prior to ever meeting up, and she had never mentioned that she had a kid or had been married. I was only 19 at the time. Couldn't have dodged that bullet any better. Story 30. Met a guy on Tinder who seemed nice and ended up going for lunch and a movie. He said he would pay for lunch and said I'll pay for the movie and popcorn as I had a voucher to use for my birthday. I meet him, and within 30 seconds, I realize he has an intellectual disability. He told me straight away that he had lied and his friend had been the one messaging me as he couldn't read or write very well. I'm not a schmuck, and as everything was paid for, and I wanted to see the movie, I still went with him. It looked like I was his carer taking him for an outing. Lies and deception, never a good start. Story 31. Met a girl on a dating site. Chatted for about 2 weeks, got along pretty well. She invited me to come to her place for a date. When I get there, there's a U-Haul truck outside. Turns out she's in the middle of packing up and moving to another state and just wanted help with the heavy lifting. She hadn't mentioned any of this in our conversations. At first, I thought maybe it was a roommate moving out or something like that. When she made it clear she was the one moving, I just said, well, good luck with her move then, and got the heck out of there. Story 32. Second meeting with a guy who had agreed on an FWB situation. First meeting was fine. No red flags, but we didn't do more than Netflix or making out. I'm a nurse and had worked the night shift. Got home at 8 a.m. and we had previously arranged that he'd come over for a little something before I went to sleep for the day. He showed up completely disheveled and half awake, saying he stayed up all night so he could sleep with me all day. This immediately irritated me because first of all, it was weird, and second, he hadn't asked if it was okay prior, and he wasn't okay with me. Before I could tell him he couldn't stay, he went straight to my room, laid on my bed, and passed out. I'm annoyed and exhausted. It took me like 15 minutes to wake him up, and then he proceeded to try and initiate with me while half asleep. He smelled like he hadn't showered in days and had slathered on baby powder scented deodorant to mask the smell. His sloppy behavior and odor were both repulsive, and I knew immediately there was no way I could ever feel attracted to this person again. Story 33. Met outside the bar. It was summer and I was wearing a miniskirt and a t-shirt, casual or nice. We went inside, sat close to the bar and split nachos, and the conversation ran the gamut. Touched on politics, his previous job, movies, poker, which happened to be on TV and something that he did in his spare time. Apparently, his friend was in a tournament that was being televised. It was pleasant enough. I wasn't totally feeling it, but felt the conversation was flowing nicely from topic to topic and appreciated that. He left to go to the men's room, came back and proceeded to comment on my skirt and asked me if I was wearing any garments, then asking me what color and type I was wearing. I didn't respond, but commented how we'd gone from all these topics to now talking about my garments, and he would not divert from that topic. He left, and he insisted on walking me to my car and also asked that I drive him to his car, which was in a parking lot. I deliberately parked in the lane of the parking lot, which was one-way and circular, as it would mean someone would eventually need to honk to get past. He tried taking advantage of me as I held my hands up like I was in a bank robbery stick-up and said, I'm uncomfortable. And then someone drove up behind and I said, oh, gotta move. And he had barely closed the door when I took off. Story 34. I told the guy that my friend who texted me while on a date has been a bit down lately, overworked and tired, which led into having spurs of depression. My date laughed and said that depression isn't a real thing and my friend just needed to get some. When I tried to explain to him that depression is real because it's a chemical imbalance in your brain and it's an illness of an organ just like any other organ can get sick, he said something like, it's all fake. You just need a little sunshine and fresh air. Look at me. I'm not depressed. Turns out he's not depressed because you actually need a brain for it to get sick. Story 35. Oh my goodness, I've got a story for this one. Back in my extremely lonely, single for a long time, no standards phase, I went on a date with a dude. It wasn't my type, but I remember thinking, there's nothing wrong with him. Pipes are bogus, just go on a date with him. It could be great. Long story short, it wasn't. We went to a Tex-Mex restaurant. I suggested it, so I was more than prepared to pay. I ordered an enchilada, second cheaper item on the menu, and he got some nachos. I thought things were going well, but he started complaining about how food is expensive and that, of course, he was expected to pay. I told him I was okay to cover stuff, paid at the end of the meal, and we left, but he still complained about some of my enchiladas. We run into a friend of his as we're walking out to the car park, and he angles his body so I'm behind him, almost like he's hiding me. Okay, weird, but not so bad. Then he asks if I'd like to go for a drive, and I say, sure, where to? And he tells me he's got a special spot. So we're in the car and driving for about 45 minutes. I'm not panicking because he seems harmless, if just a bit rude. He spends the whole time talking about how much money he makes at his job. Then we finally pull off the highway, and I'm so excited to see what he has planned. We drove into a car wash. I adore automatic car washes, so I was honestly kind of keen. But then he parks in a self-service bay and takes another 30 minutes to hand wash his car while I just sit there, by myself, in his car. Then when he got back in, all he'd talk about was how much he loved his car, how fast and good it was. Okay, fair. Maybe it was a good car. I've got no clue. And people are allowed to like stuff. Then he did a burnout in the car park and laughed like a jackal. By this point, I was getting a little bit annoyed. So I suggested a nice park down the road from my house where we could talk. That way I'd have a quick getaway if I needed to leave. He tells me he knows a better one, his favorite park, and drives me to the most secluded park I've ever seen. It's behind a golf course and the river, and there's just a picnic table and some gravel, sad grass, and a rusty swing set. Again, making the best of a bad situation, I go to the swings and try to have fun. Casually, I ask why this is his favorite park. Maybe it has sentimental meaning to him? Maybe he likes the river? No, it's because at night, this park is well known for extracurricular nighttime activities, and he wanted to know if I was keen. And he launched into a tirade about how he was such a nice guy and everyone on dating app we met on was shallow and wouldn't give him a chance. Considering he hadn't asked me anything about myself, complained about the restaurant, took a 45-minute joyride to hand wash his car, and then took me to the middle of nowhere to visit a sketchy park where he talked my ear off about how witches are frigid. No, I was not keen. Story 36. Alright, so this wasn't really a first date vibe, more like a one-night stand that she was trying to level up to more dates, but man, the red flags were waving like crazy. First off, she played the same record like 5 times straight because apparently I wasn't really listening. Then she wouldn't stop bringing up her ex, comparing me to him the whole time. We're making out and she suddenly stops to tell me to stop looking at her like a corn star, which honestly I have no idea what that even meant. Then during some super awkward sexy time, she drops the "I love you" bomb. Like, what? She also grilled me super hard about the books I read, which is cool to talk about, but she was so condescending about my taste in books and music. Then mid-sexy time, she just stops, rolls over, and says, "We're done." Which, hey, totally her call, but the way she did it was so abrupt. We did, finish things up in the morning, and then she got some stuff on her stomach, and just casually rolled over in bed and smeared it around. Lol. Oh, and her place was a total mess. She was cute, yeah, but it was just one red flag after another. Definitely had to say no to another hangout. Story 37. Met a girl on Plenty of Fish. She sent pics. She was attractive. We arranged to meet at a local restaurant. I text her when I get there and wait to walk in with her. She gets out of her car and is 3 times the size of her photos. I'm not handsome by any means, but this was pure false advertisement. I couldn't be mean about it, though. I just took her to the place and brought her dinner, and we had a great conversation. I may have even done a second day, but then she texted me to honestly tell me she had infections. Looking back, I think that is a super thing to come clean and reveal to someone. A lot of people do not, and that sucks. Infection and the size difference were it for me, though. I was out. Never did or will do a dating app again. Not for me. Story 38. I got in contact with a guy on Tinder once that seemed nice at first, but after a few hours of chatting, there were massive red flags. He wanted me to come over and didn't accept a no. This was a family day for me, and I wanted to spend time with him. To kind of understand me better in this situation, this was just 2 months after I quit a 5-year-long extreme toxic relationship. So I was a massive people pleaser at the time. So when he didn't give up and made me feel guilty, said he already told his friends he has no time because he wants to meet up with me, that he's now lonely AF, and so on. I couldn't stand it anymore and drove the 45 minutes to his house at 11 p.m. to a guy I only knew a few hours and was a typical nice guy. Yep, I was that dumb. I packed a knife in my sleeve just in case. It was awful. Just talked about himself. Talked me over and tried to make me intoxicated so I couldn't drive anymore. I stayed 3 hours out of guilt and because I didn't want to be rude. Then I drove off and was so happy to be home again. I wrote him a message the next day that there won't be a second date, and he said something between the lines of, "We'll see." Bombed me with texts the next day, so I blocked him and he started stalking. Texted me insults every 2 days for half a year. He was the reason I uninstalled Tinder and stayed single another year. Enrico, if you ever see this, you're an absolute schmuck. Yeah, frick off, Enrico. Story 39. Not a day, but was at a bar a long time ago. This girl who I had worked with briefly was there making eyes at me all night. She walks over and is overly flirtatious. I think, damn, I may get some tonight. She invites me over to her house to go hot tubbing along with some of her friends. We get into the hot tub and 2 of her guy friends get in and she starts aggressively making out with both of them while just staring me down and making creepy eye contact the whole time. I did the old, well, it's time I hit the old dusty trail thing and left. I was there for maybe less than an hour. Everything about that situation was weird. Story 40. He was a friend of mine, so I expected him to be a decent person, but it started with him wanting to meet up at his place and not listening to me saying no. I told him that it was either meeting somewhere in the city or not meeting at all. So he proposed a bar somewhere, and I decided to give him another chance. He just ordered a second beer when he proposed to go to his place after the beer. I said no. He said, "Nah, but come on. I bought a good bottle of wine and even practiced the piece on the piano especially for you." I felt like he was trying to make me feel guilty, so I felt even more uncomfortable and said no again. And then he started raising his voice, saying, "It's always the same with women. Why can't you just act normal? What is wrong with you?" At this point, the other people at the bar were looking at us, and it felt like he was trying to shame me into leaving with him. So I stood up, downed my beer, and left. Story 41. I went on a date that was set up by a mutual friend, and it was at the time a lot of women's marches were going on at the beginning of the Trump presidency. Things are going well. She's very into the women getting together thing, as am I. We're having some food and drinks, and she then proceeds to mock an overweight woman for what she's wearing, another for this and that, etc. It was such a what the heck moment. I'm the type of cat that is pretty understanding that we're all flawed people, but I have a hard time with that kind of hypocrisy. Story 42. She wouldn't make a single decision. We had a couple hours to wait for dinner. I asked if she wanted to get drinks at the bar and talk, or if she wanted to window shop and enjoy the Christmas lights. Heavily decorated part of the city. I don't care, whatever you want to do. After we sat, we looked at the menu and she puts hers down. I inquire what she had decided on. "I don't know, I'll probably just order whatever you're getting." Asked what she did for fun. "I shop. Sometimes I go to the casino. That's it." It was absolutely impossible to start a conversation with her. She asked me no questions the entire 4 hours we were on our date. Story 43. I was in Orlando on vacation. My brother was meeting me the next night, so I decided to explore the town on my own. I saw a comedy show at the Improv that evening and hopped on Tinder to see if anyone wanted to join me. My treat. I matched with this very cute girl and we started chatting. Religion came up early on and she mentioned being raised Mormon but no longer believing in it. Anyway, we decided to meet up for the show. While we were at a table, waiting for it to start, chatting casually, religion came up again in a lighthearted way. Then I made a joke about how basically all religions are cults, especially Mormonism and Scientology, and she completely freaked out. She started yelling in the club about how she wasn't stupid and in a cult and that she was very serious about her Mormonism and how important it is to her. Then she demanded we leave. I simply said that I had already paid for the show and didn't want to leave. She stood there in disbelief and then stormed out. The guy at the table next to me leaned over and said I clearly dodged a bullet. I ended up hanging out with him and his wife, enjoying food and drinks. Mike Kaplan performed and was absolutely stellar. Highly recommend his comedy. Glad I stayed. Also, Mormonism is a cult. Just saying. Ooh, hot take. Story 44. I went out with a girl who was incredibly sarcastic and kind of rude. My whole family is pretty sarcastic and can often be perceived as rude, me included, so trust me when I say she took it to a whole new level. It wasn't fun, witty banter or playful ribbing. It was just a person I knew absolutely nothing about making fun of me. I played along the best I could, but honestly had a terrible time. When we were walking out, I said, "Well, I'm guessing you don't want a second date," thinking that we both thought the date went terrible. She looked at me shocked and kind of hurt and just said, "What?" I felt super freaking bad, honestly. She apparently thought it went really well and enjoyed the date. Some people just don't know how to read social cues. Story 45. I met a guy online who was a magician, like doing dangerous stunts kind. He bragged about doing shows for royalty. He bragged about how he didn't go to college like his sucker friends who pay student loans and yet he made more money than them. He met at a British pub type spot and he didn't drink alcohol or eat anything as he was vegan. He picked the place though. The kicker is when we paid the bill and split it, he reached over, took the receipt and pocketed it. I said, "You're using this as a tax write-off?" He's like, "Yeah, of course." I said, "Then maybe you could have paid for my drink then." He immediately looked uncomfortable. A few months later, I was reading a daily paper and there he was, jumping out of a plane with his hands handcuffed. The article was a documentary about his magic. Well, if you like these stories, here's more. YouTube thinks you're going to love this. Catch you in that video.